Hello, and welcome to the About Healing podcast, a show created for those on or awakening into their spiritual journeys, and who are ready, wanting, and learning how to heal themselves. I am your host, About Healing medium and certified spiritual healer, Sheree Buckman. It is my purpose to guide others to the path of self-healing and to inspire those on their spiritual journeys in finding their truths. Join me as I share my experience and unfiltered perspective in healing, as well as the incredible wisdom of the loving energy that guides us. Let's begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of About Healing podcast. Now, I don't know about you, Copper, but I'm feeling pretty excited about today's episode.
I hadn't noticed.
No? Because today, it is not just me and Copper, or just me talking and Copper listening in the background. Today, we actually have our very first guest on the podcast. No pressure whatsoever.
I don't feel any pressure at all.
No, man, you are setting the standard, though. Just letting you know beforehand.
Okay.
Yeah. So today I have a new friend. This is Miss Jennifer Wingard on today. And so what's very interesting is my new friend, Miss Jennifer. We have a very interesting, very synchronistic story of kind of how we connected and what brought her here today.
Yes, we do.
And so, Jennifer, actually, do you want to go ahead and start sharing a little bit of that story?
Sure, I can absolutely do that. We kind of met through Copper, but not directly. I was scrolling Instagram one day and came across a post for your podcast. Loved the name. That was the About Healing podcast. And I was super big on just the whole wording and the description. And I did later in that day listen to the episode and I enjoyed it. And it was the first one you did right after Katie had decided to leave. And so it was your first solo. And I thought that was so brave of you. And later that evening, Copper, out of the blue, messaged me and said, "Hey, I think you and Sheree should talk." And she described to me a little bit about who you are and told me about your podcast because she was clearly unaware that I had already listened to it. So that's how you and I ended up coming together.
Right.
You know, we've got a lot in common, and it really was just the perfect little storm of events.
Right, which is interesting because on the other side of that conversation before Copper reached out to you, I don't know, because again, I had just taken the show over. Copper, out of the blue, it was like during these moments right before a recording saying, so I have this friend. I really feel like you two need to talk. Like, I really think that you, like her story, like she's your cup of tea, essentially. Would you be interested in me contacting her, maybe even have her on the show at one point or something like that? Again, having no idea any part of your story or anything else. I'm like, sure, but I trust Copper. It's fine. And then there that was too. So,
but the same day I discovered your podcast on my own that she reached out. So that was something. And I have listened to every episode since. And enjoyed them.
And I love it. And, you know, ever since that, and then when Copper had pointed you out, saying that I should probably contact you, I noticed or found you on Instagram and noticed you were already following. And I followed you back. And then I've been following you and what you do, which is fun and glorious, which we can go ahead and talk about that. So, Jennifer, before we finish the rest of this story, which brought us here today, tell us a little bit about what you do.
I practice divination through tarot, but a misconception is that tarot sees the future. I use tarot more as a way to help people see the truths in themselves and their situations that are already there. So I'm not going to help you figure out whether or not you're going to get that house or whether or not your true love is waiting for you at the bus stop. I want to help you dig in and be yourself and feel yourself and feel good about yourself. So that's how I use tarot. and it has been remarkably accurate for a lot of people. I've really enjoyed doing it. I started reading tarot when I was about 14, which is very young. Read for friends, read for families, did it for myself, and I always treated it very much as kind of a little party trick. You know, it was that thing where you could have somebody pull a card and read it for them, and they get the big eyes. As I got more mature, I started reading more just for myself and used it as my own little guide for checking in with myself or my situation or other things. And I woke up in May in the middle of the night last year at 3 a.m. and thought, I should do this professionally. I should start reaching out to other people. And my little town in southern Florida has a seasonal outdoor market, and I thought, I'm going to just start small. I'll set up my booth there and see how I'm received. That started in October, was my very first booth. I have had repeat customers. So I have a little selection of crystals that people can pick out, which of course they love to do. And I do sell some hand blended oils and bath teas and things, but a lot of people are coming for the tarot. And I have gone from being kind of afraid to put myself out there to now being a guest on a podcast. I'm been invited to read tarot for 2 separate fundraisers and an art show. I have a very busy spring coming up. So my little, I'm not sure how I'm going to be received in my community is actually turned into something a little bit different and a lot bigger.
And I love this and adore this. And I will say I adore her tarot cards. She does a daily reading on her social media, which we will share at the end of the podcast, and we'll put links to it on my social media after the episode. But it is very healing. And I love that you have that aspect, because I follow too. And sometimes she hits home for me. So I'm an avid follower of Miss Jennifer here. But now to kind of bring back, and I think that is why for a while I've been following her too and following her tarot, and because it's just very positive and it makes me feel good. So even though I am always trying to spread positivity, I fill my feed with so much more positivity because I need that for my own soul. And so Miss Jennifer, I believe that you were probably always the very first one that populates when I get back on to my Insta account.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. But it kind of brings us back to kind of where and why we are here today and why I have her on the show. It came down to, again, while I was preparing for the season, I knew that I wanted to have guests on. I wanted to bring more guests on and trying to think about the topic that I was doing and what would fit in there. Who had a story or who had this energy that could really fuel or assist in my topic of awakening into your power. Not having even have met or had a personal conversation in any way, shape, or form with Jennifer, she was already on my brainstorming outline for this season. I had no idea what her story was. I had no idea, honestly, where we would go with it until very recently. I trust my intuition. I'm always guided through this whole podcast and what I talk about and how I talk about it. But I just knew that it was time to connect with her. So I messaged her on social media and asked if she would be interested in meeting virtually to kind of have a meeting and talk. I wanted to hear her story. And I think almost immediately within minutes, you're like, yes!
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm so honored, and I resonate so much with what you say and how you talk and how open you are about topics and difficult topics. I admire that, and I am happy to be a part of your process.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel like I should have a little blushing emoji right now. I'm like, oh my gosh. It's really hard for me to take compliments. Yeah. I'm still in that phase and trying to, but thank you. And so even going into our meeting and conversation, I still had her on my board for this season. I am just learning her story as she's talking, and I still have no idea what I want to ask her if I were to have her on. But then we just started talking more and more, and I started hearing her whole story, and holy cow, if it didn't hit me like a ton of bricks. Because Jennifer, as she tells her story, which she will in just a minute, I will stop talking and allow her to start talking more. But hearing how and where she comes from and how she expresses herself and stands up for herself and her way of being and being very bold and very proud and in her own energy. And you can just feel it. You can feel it by the way she talks. Again, I will allow you to feel that in a minute when I allow her to talk more. But I, again, knew right then and there, I'm like, it's authenticity. And I asked her, I'm like, would you be on the podcast and would you talk about authenticity? This is authentic power, because I feel like she oozes in it and it comes naturally. And obviously she said yes.
I did. And it is, I want other people who are struggling with their authenticity or their place in the world to understand that this is a natural process. Almost everyone goes through it. A lot of us just end up having to go through it on our own. And I don't want people to feel that way anymore. I know I was inspired. A lot of times you'll hear people say, I don't share what I share to change your mind. I share what I share so that other people like me will feel like they have a voice or that they're being reasonable. So that, I read that a long time ago on several different Facebook posts, and I just thought that's it. So I really started sharing things that were important to me. And even though they may have rubbed people in my particular social circle the wrong way at the time, I started feeling stronger. So I want people to understand that you have to be willing to put yourself out there about just one thing. Stand up for yourself, say the thing, and then the rest of it just comes so much more easily. It stops being a struggle the minute you decide to be authentic about it.
And would you say, because in my mind, as you say that, it's kind of how I've spoken about facing fear. You have to break the barrier of just kind of doing it or saying it. And because the hardest part is just that leap, that initial leap to do it. And then once it's done, you're like, yes. Okay, it's done. I did it. Like, it's not so bad anymore. The biggest part is.
And I did it well. I survived. Yeah. I think that we're conditioned from a very early age that we exist for the convenience of other people. I really do. I don't think that it's a deliberate thing that anybody ever did. But it's just generations of children are time consuming and draining, and a lot of people don't have the time or patience for that. I'm still guilty of that with my own children or my grandchildren. There's a lot of that. Not now. It's not convenient for me, so not now. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to deal with it, so not now. And we carry that, and I think especially as women, but men struggle with it too. We carry that into adulthood, where we don't want to be seen as a disruption or an inconvenience to the people around us, because we've been taught from childhood that that's not our place. And taking that step to be authentic to yourself, or to overcome a fear of being disruptive to other people, takes a lot of courage. And I am a bold person. I am an only child. I did not have siblings to either bolster me or hold me back. I have spent my life figuring stuff out for myself, because I didn't have an example of other kids around, whether younger or older. So doing stuff on my own comes pretty naturally at this point. And by the time I was ready to be authentic and stand up for myself, I was already kind of known as that person who was never afraid to rock the boat. I was never known as the person who wouldn't stand up and make a scene at the school board meeting, or, I was never known as the one who wouldn't talk back to the sheriff, and those are things that I have passed down to some of my children too, who've been called things like instigators and ringleaders, but that's okay. So when the next step showed up and I still wasn't happy, I wasn't comfortable with who I was. I constantly felt like I was living like someone else. I didn't even know who I was, to be honest. So that next...
Around what age?
Did I start having this? I would say probably wasn't until I was about 40 that I really realized that I was not living in a way that rung true to who I was. I thought I had that, but I was living to other people's expectations. And a lot of times I wasn't meeting their expectations because those expectations didn't matter to me. It didn't matter to me. I didn't care, and it starts from childhood. I was an excellent student when I was in elementary school. I was a pretty good student in middle school. And by the time high school rolled around, I was in complete, I'm done with this nonsense mode. And I ended up in a private school for kids. It was an alternative private school for kids who struggled in a traditional structure. And if it wasn't for that, I don't think I ever would have even made it through high school. So I've always bucked the system, but I was never given the room to figure out why I did that, because of course it goes back to my behavior was inconvenient.
So you just had this natural, I guess, urge or push, or
I wanted something different. And I didn't know what it was. Yeah, it was wrong. It was all wrong. It just did not fit me. And, we tried college and I failed at that miserably because I was so burnt out on school and I was not emotionally mature enough to be on my own. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to do this and I didn't want to do that. And I struggled with a lot of things because I didn't understand that my feelings were valid. Because I had never been around anybody that didn't just do what they were told to do. So I always felt kind of like an outcast or a weirdo or what have you. And very similar to you, Sheree, I moved a lot in childhood, especially in early childhood. I never learned how to make friends. I never learned how to keep friends. And I never learned who I was because I was constantly trying.
Yeah. It's that survival mode of adaptation. We're adapting. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what was important to me. I didn't know what I stood for because I didn't have any other examples of someone who was living in a stable home. And I realize that makes my parents sound like terrible people, and they were not by any stretch of the imagination. But when you move a lot, it's not stable. You can have the best family in the world, but if you're constantly changing house every year, it's not stable. It's hard for kids. Children are resilient, but I think back in a certain time period, maybe in the 80s and 90s, we were treated as if, well, of course they'll get over it. They're kids. What do they know? And it turns out we knew a lot. And what we were seeing wasn't fair. We just didn't know that we had options. Yeah, you remember a lot of it. And again, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't that anybody got up and decided they were going to make my life miserable. I just didn't have exposure to anybody else who was like me or thought like me. And a lot of that was because I didn't know who I was. I had spent almost my whole life trying to fit in. So it was probably well into adulthood before I figured out what the problem was, and that the problem was me, and it was my approach, and it was my attitude. And that was when I started speaking up for things that didn't sit right with me, and whether they were political or educational or religious or having to do with mental health or physical health. I really started taking a stand on things that were impacting my life. And I did it in a very brash, loudmouthed way because that was the only way I felt heard. And you can have discourse with people, but when they disagree with you on a fundamentally moral level, there's just no way to be polite. So a lot of the stuff that would come out of my mouth would be like, I see you're filled with hate. What's your problem? That would rub people a wrong way. So I found myself alone in a lot of ways and had to figure out who I was. But it was not until the lockdown in 2020 that I found myself really standing up for myself and really saying what was on my mind. Before the pandemic, I was on top of the world. I had what I wanted, what I believed I wanted. I have a nice home. My husband has a good job. It allowed me to have a part-time job. We were homeschooling. My girls at the time were young enough. They were doing dance classes 5 days a week. I mean, it was just, we could drop everything we wanted and go to the beach for no reason whatsoever. We could take a whole day off and go lay by the pool at my mom's house. It was just, I was on top of the world. I thought. It turned out when we lost all of those activities, I realized that a lot of the things that I was saying, the way that I was interacting with people was to keep the peace so that my girls could continue to be included. When you live in a very small town, your opinions will impact every aspect of your life because it's super cliquey. And, I already struggled because, say, we didn't go to the right church or we didn't attend church at all. That was problematic for some people. People would actively avoid us because they figured out we didn't go to church. That's fine. That's on them. I don't need those people in my life. But I kept a lot of my opinions about, race and sexuality and gender identity and religion and law enforcement. I kept a lot of those opinions to myself and quietly let the people around me think that just my silence meant that I agreed with them. So when the pandemic started and we were forced to be home for a few weeks, I started watching people's posts and their attitudes about, the civil upheavals. And I thought, these are not people that I like. These are not people that have the same moral position that I do. And it doesn't necessarily make them wrong, but I'm not going to keep my yap shut anymore. And I started posting and sharing the things that I believed in. And boy, did my friends list plummet. And I found myself friendless. My whole social circle over the summer and fall of 2020 just collapsed. My kids weren't involved in activities because a lot of them were closed or they were in person and I didn't feel that they were being handled safely. We lost everything. We lost absolutely everything, and that left me with a huge amount of time to do some soul searching and really start practicing my craft and studying ways to come to terms with being myself. And it took me a couple of years, honestly, to just really hit my stride. And that's where I am now. And being authentic to myself and who I am as a person is probably the best thing I've ever done for myself in my whole life. And I honestly think it's one of the best things I could have done for my family and for my kids. I am not a different person than I was, in 2019. I'm just not trying to buffer it or make it palatable to people around me. And I had read so much about, when you let go of what doesn't fit you, what doesn't support you, you're going to make room for what does. And I understood what that meant, but I was still so afraid. I'm going to be the only person in this small town that carries on this way. But honestly, my family were involved in what was the first civil unrest in this community ever. It was the first ever kind of protest against George Floyd's death. We participated in that. And not only did we participate in the first one, we helped organize a couple more until there was a tragedy in our town and the people who were involved felt that it was no longer appropriate to protest or what have you. And that was fine. I spent my summer holding space for people so that they felt safe to protest. And when they decided that they didn't want to anymore, then we just let it go. But that was huge for us to get out there and make our face that. And it did not go over well in some of our circle. And that's okay. That's okay, because I've replaced the people that I thought were my friends and the people that I thought were supportive with people who actually are supportive, people who are willing to reconsider their thoughts and opinions, people who are willing to do a little introspection on how their behaviors impact people around. So I did. I cleared out a space, and it was painful, and boy, was it scary, and it was lonely. It was lonely. But I still have a couple of friends in town, and I've made some new ones. And I am, in fact, hosting a little informal get-together of like-minded people at a local park. We're just going to get together, and I've basically said, bring your knowledge, bring your questions, bring your coffee, whatever, and we'll just hang out. So I'm excited to see how that turns out. I've had a lot of interest in it so far, and it's still, yeah, I would love to have anybody show up. We need this. It's time. Not everybody can depend on the support systems they had growing up or 5 years ago or last week. And you have to be willing to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and open yourself up to help other people.
And I love that you're saying it and I didn't say it. Well, and I love that somebody else can say it without, I wanted people to hear this in your story, that it wasn't just my story, that other people are going through theirs and finding these pieces to know that. And I love especially what you were just talking about, that when you were choosing to speak on your deepest beliefs and beliefs in things that are hot topics. And especially you're in a small community, yes. You're a part of the Bible Belt, in Florida, and to have an opinion, a strong opinion that might be on the completely other end of the spectrum, and some others, like, we don't talk about that. Like, that really stirs a pot. Like, we don't do this. But you were bold and you did it. And to let people know that, yeah, you might be changing your friends list, but when you were going through this and you were choosing that part, you were filtering through those that no longer align with you because you were becoming a different person. You were becoming that truer part of you. But with that being said, like Jennifer just said, she started finding new ones, and she started gaining this whole new tribe of people that are supporting you, and you have similar beliefs, and
yes.
It's all part of that process, but it didn't happen overnight, right?
No, it didn't. And I did experience a really long, dark night of the soul where I sat in my chair and I'm an avid crocheter. I am an avid reader. And I found myself not able to do any of those things. I would sit and scroll just mindlessly on my phone and could not get motivated on any project. No book could really hold my interest. And that went on for a couple of months. And it was tough. Meanwhile, I'm trying to help my children adapt to life without their activities or their normal little friends or different things, like that. We were stuck at home for a long time. But boy, when I came out of that, it was like, I felt like a whole person. I cut my hair. I have always had long, long, long hair, and I cut my hair to my shoulders when I came out of that. And it was just, I started buying new clothes, and I am very much a different person. So I like to say, if you knew me in 2019, you don't know me today. My family does, obviously, but people in town, people, that I see in the grocery store, the people that we used to hang out with all the time, they never knew me because I didn't even know myself. I didn't know who I was for years.
And that's exactly how I feel too.
And it's tough. It's not for the faint of heart. It is heartbreaking. It is wrenching. It is earth shattering on many levels and in many ways, but it's worth it. It's worth it. It's like any loss in your life. You have to grieve. I grieve the things that maybe I missed in the past. I grieve the things that we will never have. But it was worth it. It's worth it. And I do think it's a better example for my kids, that it's up to us to manage our expectations. It's not up to them to live up to what we expect because they're not us. And I felt very much like an extension of the adults in my life, that I was expected to follow these certain patterns, or I was expected to follow this certain plan, and it just did not fit me. It didn't fit. None of it ever felt comfortable.
And how do you feel now?
I feel a lot better. And I am, in fact, it's really funny because I'm sitting here and my family knows that I was doing this morning, and my husband and my daughter are both sitting here just looking at me, listening to this. And it's really weird to just blurt things out like that in front of people. But that's part of the authenticity. And my husband has been so supportive and has done a lot of work himself, just managing expectations and learning that, people do change. I know it's been tough for him in ways to watch me just become this complete crazy woman in this small town. But he's never been known much for holding back either. So, but I think you have to be true to yourself. You have to. And for some people, living up to their parents' expectations, or, making the certain career or going to the certain school may be what they find fulfilling. And I think that that's fantastic for them. But for a lot of people, we don't want to be known for those things. Like, my life is not a resume. My life is meant to be lived. And I think a lot more people are coming to that realization. I think astrologically, maybe it was time. You've got a lot of planets and things shifting. But I think the pandemic had a huge effect on people, where you're stuck in your own head for a while and you start to realize, this was not my life. This was not the reality that I thought it was, or this is not the reality that I expected for myself. And you got to make those changes and find people who will support you.
Yes to everything you said. And I love it. And honestly, for you to sit here and record this episode, even with your own family audience in the room with you, I think that's amazing. I don't know if I could do that, like having other people in the room with me. I think they would get more awkward. I can get even more awkward. And yeah, that would totally cause that.
But once you accept that this is who you are, and you're with people who accept that this is who you are, it's not awkward. It's not awkward anymore. So, it might be for them. That's their problem. That's not my problem.
Now, let me ask you this. If you were to give like your top 3 tips from everything you've experienced, if you were to condense it into the top 3 of owning your authenticity, what would they be?
The first one would be that you have to check in with yourself. You have to listen to yourself. You have to trust your gut. That's the first and foremost. You have to learn to trust yourself. And that takes practice. It is definitely a skill that a lot of us are not taught, because we're expected to follow rules and other people's expectations. And that doesn't leave you a whole lot of room to figure out things for yourself. So I would definitely say you have to start by checking in with yourself. If it's not working, change. It's your life. You've got to make those changes. If something isn't holding you up, or if something is holding you back, get rid of it. I don't mean that you just chop off a whole relationship overnight. You can work on changing it if that person is important to you. But you have to be true to yourself. Absolutely. All the time. The next one after that would definitely be set yourself some boundaries. You have to set boundaries for what is and is not acceptable in your life. And I have been accused of throwing ultimatums at people. And I don't believe that a boundary and an ultimatum are the same thing in any way, shape, or form. I feel like an ultimatum is an attempt to control someone, where a boundary is an attempt to control what happens to me. So people like to use the word ultimatum because that helps them feel like the victim in your situation. Whereas if you continue this behavior, you and I won't be interacting anymore. That's not an ultimatum. That's just the way it is. It's not an if or. It's definitely you're doing this and this is the consequence. A boundary is about protecting yourself and your experience, and you are absolutely entitled to have the experience that you want. That you don't owe your life or your experiences to anybody else. You are your own free person, and you've got to set those boundaries. And boy, is it awkward to start doing that. But again, like anything else, it's like the first time you face that fear, it feels really weird and uncomfortable the first time. But like with practice, it's going to keep getting easier, and you will get better at it. And people who respect your boundaries truly care about you, even if it's a stranger. Like, you can be out somewhere, and I'm still not comfortable with people standing right on top of me, and I never have been. And I was so excited because the pandemic was like 6 feet apart. So you got to tell people, hey, could you back up a little? And I'm still doing that. And people in grocery store lines will get very upset, or they'll be like, oh yeah, sorry, personal space. The person who backs up is a genuinely caring person. Like, they don't even know you, but they're respectful of your space. And a lot of us don't even demand that respect from our friends or our family. So, you set those boundaries and hold them. And it's a struggle. You have to be real. You have to be real. As awkward or strange as it might feel to tell people how you genuinely feel, we're brought up to sugarcoat things or to be polite or to be mindful of other people's feelings, which you should also be. But that doesn't mean that you have to stop being real about what you're saying. You can tell someone how you feel without being rude or hurtful about it. But people are going to get their feelings hurt when you're honest with them. They're going to get their feelings hurt. You will hear excuses. You will have people get upset with you, try to gaslight you, which is a word that I don't really like to use a lot, but that's definitely what happens. My favorite is, well, that's not how I remember it. Okay, well, that's how I remember it. Let's talk about me for a second. It's not about you. I'm telling you that what you said to me was hurtful. It's not about you. It's about me. And you have to be able to hold your ground on those things. And it's also important, the flip side of that is definitely that you allow other people to be real with you. Don't make excuses for your behavior. We have all done terrible things that we wish we could change. We have all made mistakes we wish that we could correct. Admitting that is probably the healthiest thing you could do for your relationship with anybody. So be real. Check in with yourself. Make some boundaries and hold them. And be real, be honest. And you're going to lose people and it's going to hurt and you're going to sit, I'm tearing up right now, you're going to sit and you're going to cry and you're going to think, am I the biggest idiot in the world? And you might be. You might have made some terrible decisions along the way, but on the other side of that is happiness and your ability to help people. And I think that's one of the things I really want people to understand is that everybody's going to hurt when they start to make these changes, but other people are going to see you standing in your own light, standing in your authenticity, living your life in a way that's meaningful to you, surrounded by people that support you, and they're going to want that. You're setting an example for other people around you, and whether it's your parents or your neighbors or the people that you work with or your kids or the group, it's your community group, or wherever you hang out, when people see you start just being real and how that changes your life, they're going to want that. They're going to want that for themselves. And it's important when you give people the space to figure it out for themselves. Like, one of the things I really dislike, especially in the spiritual community, is there seems to be like a lot of gatekeeping or telling people what to do. And it's okay to just sit there and let somebody ramble and try to figure things out. You don't have to give them an answer, but you can sit there and give them that ear or that shoulder to lean on. And I think that that's one of the most important things you can do once you've taken those first steps for yourself, and encourage other people. So that's it. I could go on for like hours.
No, I always feel the same way when I'm recording. I'm like, I can keep going, but then we're completely turning it into new episodes. But Jennifer, I love everything you just said, especially when you chose those top 3 tips. I couldn't have said it better. And if anybody could see like the behind the scenes, like the video of the recording, I'm over here like raising the roof when she's talking about, or when she hits the topic of, yes, especially like being real, but always remember the balance that you need to hear other people. I'm like, yes, because it is all part of the process, is that as you are becoming real, you're also making sure that you are hearing others and allowing them as well, because that is also the key in being authentic and setting boundaries and so on and so forth, is balance. It is balance, and I love it. So as we wrap up the episode, Jennifer, how can others follow you or find more information about you?
Well, right now I am exclusively on social media. I have not taken the plunge yet to get a website. I'm sure that will be happening this year sometime. I do plan to start a blog as well. So you can find me on Facebook as the Lunar Haven, and on Instagram as the Lunar Haven Shoppe, but, the fancy old-fashioned way, with 2 P's and an E at the end. The Lunar Haven was already taken on Instagram, so I had to figure out something else, but I am a metaphysical shop.
I personally love the whole shop part at the end. I'm like, ooh, shoppy. It's kind of where my mind wants to go. Shoppy.
Yes, it is a shoppy. ye old shoppy of, and I am the Lunar Haven Metaphysical Shop. We are offering healing from the heartland because I am located in the heartland of Florida, deep in cow and orange and
alligators
country. Very near the swamps. Yes, lots of alligators. I could throw a rock out my door and hit the Caloosahatchee River. So it is lovely out here that I am often referred to as a swamp witch.
Hey, I think that's awesome. And for everybody else, the links will be available in the bio, and I will post it on my social media too. So you'll be able to find her if you didn't get a pen or if you're not sure about the spelling. Go ahead, find her on social media. She does her daily tarot, which I love, and she posts fun videos about all the wildlife that surrounds her, and it's so fun to watch. What an amazing gift to be able to have Jennifer on and tell her story. And while I love giving my insights and trying to share the messages through my experience, I knew it was so important that others can hear the same situations that what we're going through, but from somebody else and in their own experiences. To know that, again, what we're going through, that we are all linked, even if some details are slightly different. So while Jennifer always had the natural instinct to, as she says, buck the system or to question authority of things that she never quite felt to be aligned with her, she had to take time to make sense of it all. And 2020 was definitely a huge opportunity for most, where we were forced to go within and deal with the thoughts and the quiet and to slow our lives down. She took that opportunity to go through her awakening because her story is an example of what an awakening is like. She had to go in and she had to battle the darkness of and let go of who she was to align with her deepest truths, to align with her deepest self, and to not filter it anymore to make other people comfortable. And from there, her wings grew and she flew. And she's been doing it ever since, which is why I was drawn to her. There is an energetic link or this energetic brightness that I saw. And I knew that she was the perfect example to bring here now as we are talking about these journeys into awakening. Journeys into not just the awakening, but also finding your authentic self. So I hope you found her story helpful and letting it sink in and aligning within what you're going through and finding inspiration from her strength in her words. So until next time, my friends, be kind to yourself. With so much love and gratitude, I want to thank you for listening to this week's episode. My hope today is that the message continues to guide you along your path to healing. To learn more about me and my purposeful work, visit my website at abouthealingmedium.com. You can also follow About Healing Medium on Facebook and Instagram, where you can find the episode's healing guidance, quotes, tips, insights, and chances to win free stuff. To ask a question or to share comments, email me at abouthealingpodcast@gmail.com, or feel free to reach me on Facebook and Instagram at About Healing Medium. Until next time, be kind to yourself.